Look up with me into the night sky, toward that still red point of light known as Mars. The modern world has always regarded it as a dead planet. But the Sumerian clay tablets may be preserving a chilling secret about it. For thousands of years, the forbidden books have whispered to us about the fallen angels. Radiant beings stripped of their power, tearing through the heavens and crashing down into the world of men. If it were me, I would ask myself this question. What if that heaven was actually a massive transit station on the surface of Mars? Those fallen angels were beings of flesh and blood. They were the Anunnaki. Around 400,000 to 450,000 years ago, an extraterrestrial race known as the Anunnaki descended to Earth to mine gold. And when their labor force rebelled, these gods carried out an unimaginable genetic intervention. They took an intelligent god, sacrificed him for his blood, and mixed it with earthly clay to clone a new slave species. That biologically engineered species, carrying both divine intelligence and the instinct to obey, was none other than us, humanity itself. Although mainstream archaeology continues to reject Zecharia Sitchin's interpretations of ancient astronauts and treat them as science fiction, millions of people around the world are still searching for the truth. Could humanity truly be the remnant of a biological experiment created to serve the alien purpose of mineral extraction? And could these clay tablets be preserving the most terrifying secret about our cosmic origin? A secret that some invisible force has always wanted to forbid you from discovering. Now step into the journey to decode the greatest mystery in human history. Banned Sumerian Tablets. The Anunnaki were real in the 400,000-year-old genetic intervention. The origin of the Mesopotamian city-states and the appearance of the Anunnaki gods. You and I, we are living in a world where the existence of the Anunnaki is often linked to spacecraft and mysteries beyond Earth. But before the name Anunnaki became the center of countless modern theories, it belonged to a very real world. A world stained with mud canals, blood, sweat, and human beings struggling to survive between life and catastrophe. That land was called Mesopotamia by the Greeks. The land between the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. At first glance on a map, you will see this land in Western Asia, modern-day Iraq, as though it were a perfect gift of creation for agriculture. Fertile alluvial soil, wide-open trade routes, endless plains stretching into the distance. An ideal place for human beings to build villages, raise livestock, and create the first cities. And yet, few people know the truth. In reality, this was an extremely harsh land. Unlike Egypt, which was always sheltered by deserts and the gentle rhythm of the Nile, southern Mesopotamia was completely exposed. There were no mountain ridges to protect it. There were no natural borders to defend it. Nomadic tribes, bloodthirsty armies from the mountains, or raiders from the surrounding steppes could pour in and plunder at any moment. The Sumerians were born in a cradle that was rich but soaked in blood. And their greatest enemy at times was the very thing that kept them alive: water. In southern Mesopotamia, summer was a furnace. The land cracked so deeply that crops would wither and die without human hands guiding water from the rivers into the fields. But when too much water came, it became a great scythe. The Tigris and Euphrates would rise, suddenly roaring, as they swept away farmland, tore apart homes, and plunged entire communities into famine. To ancient people, a flood was not a weather event. It was a death sentence. Just imagine this: your family has just bent their backs to finish sowing barley, and in a single night, violent water washes away the labor of an entire year. A village has just completed its irrigation system, and by the next morning, all that remains is a heap of mud. It was precisely in this place, where life was most fragile, that humanity's first urban civilization was forced to rise. Hardship created discipline. Human beings had to join hands, A single farmer could not reshape the course of a river alone. They needed a massive labor force to dig canals, build embankments, and distribute water. They needed people to measure boundaries, people to guard grain stores, people to supervise labor days, and also people to judge disputes when there was not enough water for every field. From one single desire to hold the water, a gigantic social machine began to move. Small villages gradually became tightly bound together. Work multiplied endlessly. From dredging canals and distributing barley rations to recording debts, tribute, and land measurements. Human memory was far too small to hold that much data, and so writing was born. The truth is, the first cuneiform clay tablets were not created to record romantic epics. They were the Excel spreadsheets of the ancient world. They recorded numbers of livestock, storage reserves, and temple property. Writing served the needs of survival management before it became a tool of mythology. We need to remember one thing clearly. Sumerian civilization did not fall from the sky in a perfect form. It rose out of mud, sweat, and the will to live. The first super cities such as Uruk-Ur and Eridu did not begin with luxurious palaces. They began with irrigated fields, grain stores, and records. But in the mind of the Sumerians, a city was not simply a place where human beings lived. A city belonged to a god. The temple, or the ziggurat, was the beating heart of the city-state. If we use a modern lens, the temple was at once city hall, central bank, and ministry of agriculture. It was the place where barley was collected, workers were managed, and wealth was distributed. The Sumerians did not separate bookkeeping from worship. The two were one. Crops, storms, war, love, and even death. All of it belonged to the picture painted by the gods. And it is here that the Anunnaki step out from the shadows of history. Before they became the focus of documentaries about extraterrestrials, the Anunnaki, or Anunna, were a supreme council of gods in Mesopotamian tradition. The true meaning of this name is often translated by scholars as royal offspring or descendants of the heavens. They were the ones who held the order of the universe and the destiny of humankind. At the head of this council stood Anu, or An, the sky god. Anu appears like a supreme emperor, majestic but extremely distant. He dwells at the height of the heavens and rarely involves himself directly in human life, leaving the governance of the earth to gods such as Enlil, the god of wind and storm, and Enki, the god of water and wisdom. Do you see the similarity here? The divine system of the Sumerians was a perfect mirror of human social structure. In the heavens, the Anunnaki Council decided fate. On Earth, kings and officials ruled the city-states. But if the Anunnaki were only gods representing nature, why do millions of modern people, through the theories of Zecharia Sitchin, firmly believe that they were alien beings who interfered with our genetic code 400,000 years ago? The truth always lies in the gaps of ancient texts. This is the piece that history often leaves open. Ancient Sumerian writings, such as the Atrahasis epic and the Enuma Elish, record a shocking event before human beings appeared. The gods had to labor by themselves. A group of lower-ranking gods, called the Agigi, were forced by the Anunnaki to dig the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They had to bend under the mud for 40 long years. Unable to endure the burden of slavery any longer, the Agigi rebelled. They burned their work tools and surrounded the palace of the god Enlil. On the brink of a divine civil war, the god of wisdom Enki offered a turning point solution: create a substitute being to carry the burden of labor. By mixing clay with the lifeblood of a slain god, that being was brought into existence. They called that being man. This detail, the mixing of divine blood and clay, became the spark for the modern theory of genetic intervention. Supporters of the ancient astronaut theory see in this not a miracle, but the description of in vitro fertilization, a manipulation of DNA to create a labor class serving the Anunnaki in the extraction of resources. However, When we place these texts back into the proper context of the Mesopotamian city-states, their true message carries a much more terrifying psychological weight. Why did the people of Mesopotamia believe they were born only to labor for the gods? Let us return to the flooded field. When a sudden storm stole the lives and grain stores of an entire village, the Sumerians needed an answer. In a world filled with uncertainty, they could not bear the thought that every disaster was only meaningless chance. They needed to believe that someone was steering the world. They needed to believe that if a flood happened, it was because they had performed a ritual incorrectly, or because the Anunnaki Council had issued a sentence. The Anunnaki were the reflection of ancient humanity's fear and desire for control. Believing in divine punishment was easier than accepting the chilling truth that human beings are incredibly small and that the universe may be coldly indifferent. The real mystery of the Sumerian tablets does not lie in whether a fleet of spacecraft once landed on Earth 400,000 years ago. The real mystery lies within us. Thousands of years have passed. The city of Uruk has collapsed into dust. The rivers have run dry in places. But the deepest longing of human beings has never changed. We still look up at the sky searching for a supreme power to explain our pain, our wars, and the injustices of our world. Whether we call them the divine council of the Anunnaki or alien architects in the end, it is still the way humanity soothes its deepest loneliness in a universe far too vast. And this is only the first page in the dossier of the Anunnaki. But that first page of the dossier was not written only with mud and natural forces. It was shaped by something far sharper control. When the first Sumerian city-states rose from the Mesopotamian plain, an iron principle was established. Human life, whether a single breath or a single grain of barley, could not be separated from the temple, the Anunnaki Empire, and the harsh rules of the gods. We as modern human beings often have the habit of drawing a clear line between religion and the machinery of the state. But if you step into the world of Mesopotamia, those two ideas merge into one. The temple was not only a place filled with incense smoke and prayers. It was the central bank. It was the Ministry of Agriculture. It was the center of labor distribution. A city that wanted to survive the fury of the flood season and the claws of war needed iron discipline. And the temple was the heart of that machine of discipline. Let us imagine a morning in ancient Uruk. Long lines of sunburned farmers carry barley into the storehouses. Shepherds drive livestock through the inspection gate. Weavers deliver rough pieces of cloth. Groups of laborers are driven out to dredge canals beneath the scorching heat. And in a hidden corner of the temple, scribes hold soft lumps of clay in their hands, pressing sharpened reeds into them in dull, repetitive strokes. Those tiny impressions were the starting point of writing. Cuneiform was not born from a desire to write poetry or record romantic love songs. It was born from control. Human memory was too fragile to remember who had paid taxes, how much grain remained in storage, and how many sheep someone owed the temple. Writing appeared as a tool of measurement and domination. Sumer did not build an empire only with mud bricks. It built an empire with records, labor discipline, and the power of theocracy. In that suffocating world, kingship carried terrifying weight. In the Sumerian king list, one of the most mysterious ancient texts in human history, there is an opening sentence that has always made scholars pause. Kingship descended from heaven. The king of Mesopotamia was not merely the man with the strongest fist. He was the signal station between the human realm and the divine realm. He was the chosen one. If a flood swept through, it was not simply a natural disaster. It was a sign that sacred order had been broken. If the grain stores were full, that king was ruling under the smile of the Anunnaki. Religion lived inside politics, and politics became the instrument of religion. And standing tall within that picture of power piercing the Mesopotamian sky was the ziggurat, Do not confuse them with the pyramids of Egypt. The pyramid was a great tomb for the dead. The ziggurat was a survival machine for the living. In the middle of a flat exposed plain, the Sumerians raised artificial mountains out of mud brick. The vertical axis of the ziggurat climbed upward, lifting sacred space closer to the heavens, while its massive base clung tightly to the earth. It was a granary, a workshop, and an administrative center. When a Sumerian farmer looked up at the ziggurat, he did not see only a temple. He saw survival. Every sun-dried mud brick, every group of workers carrying earth on their backs was a firm declaration from the city-state order still remains. The storehouses are still full, and the patron god is still looking down upon us. In a world always waiting to collapse, the ziggurat was the greatest psychological anchor. From that very anchor, we step into the council of the decision-makers. The people of Mesopotamia did not imagine a divine world that was completely foreign. They looked toward the sky and saw a reflection of their own society. On earth there were kings, officials, farmers, and slaves. In the heavens there was a court just as thick with politics, and the Anunnaki, or Anuna, were the elite class of that court. They were the senators of the ancient universe. Depending on the period from Sumer-Akkad Babylon to Assyria, the role of the Anunnaki shifted. Sometimes they ruled in the heights of the heavens. Sometimes they governed the shadowed realm of the underworld. But one truth never changed. They were the ones who held fate. They decided which city would prosper, which king would fall, and which farmer would lose his harvest. Every suffering and every glory in human life, in the end, was the result of nods within the council of the Anunnaki. But a great society cannot consist only of those who give orders. It needs bleeding hands. Beside the Anunnaki, the clay tablets also mention another name, the Igigi. This is a detail we must approach very carefully. In many modern decoding videos, people often label the Igigi as sky-watching gods or space station astronauts. The academic truth carries a darker tone. In early texts, especially the Atrahasis epic, the Igigi are a lower class of gods. They are the ones forced by the Anunnaki to bend their backs, digging rivers and opening canals for many generations. They were gods, and yet they had to do the work of slaves. By this point, you may understand why Mesopotamian texts strike the modern mind with such force. When the minds of the 20th century read about a divine council dividing classes, about groups of gods exhausted by labor, and about a decision to create humankind to carry the burden of work, they immediately filled in the gaps. They translated gods into advanced beings. They translated heaven into outer space. They translated the shaping from clay and divine blood into genetic intervention. And from there, the legend of an alien fleet coming to Earth to mine gold was born. But let us slow down for a moment. Let us look at all of this again through the eyes of a Sumerian. To them, the Anunnaki did not need to wear astronaut suits in order to be great. The clay tablets were not historical records in the modern Western sense. They were humanity's desperate and tragic attempt to explain its own suffering. Why must we labor until we are exhausted? Who threw us into this life filled with war and disease? The people of Mesopotamia soothed those heartbreaking questions by establishing an order. They would rather believe that they were workers serving a supreme divine council than accept a harsher truth that the universe might simply be a meaningless void, and that death could come from an indifferent flood. Order, even an exploitative order, still offered a sense of safety. Chaos was the most terrifying thing of all, and once this foundation becomes clear, we are finally ready to open the door into the most forbidden zone of Mesopotamian history. There the gods have grown weary. A bloody rebellion is about to erupt in heaven, and humankind is about to be born from mud and a death sentence. But that ziggurat machine could not operate by itself. It needed gears. It needed those who knew how to steer it. And at the summit of Mesopotamian power, people did not worship a chaotic crowd. The Anunnaki Council was operated by a triad of absolute power, Anu and Lil and Enki. The supreme divine triad and the story of human beings created to labor. If you want to understand how this universe operated in the mind of the ancient world, you do not need to look far. Look at this triad. They are the prototype of every political system on Earth. Standing in the highest position was Anu, the sky god. He was like an anonymous emperor seated on the highest throne holding the root of all authority. But Anu rarely intervened on Earth. He was the symbol of authority, not the one who directly placed his hands into blood and mud. The practical rule of the Earth was entrusted to the other two gods. The first was Enlil, the god of windstorm and executive power. If Anu was the law, then Enlil was the army. He represented iron command and harsh judgment. In a land like Mesopotamia, where one storm could blow away an entire city, people worshipped Enlil not only out of reverence, they worshipped him out of fear. Enlil was the god who could raise you to the throne, but he could also drown you in black mud in his wrath. The second was Enki, the god of fresh water and wisdom. While Enlil was tied to destruction, Enki was the source of life and creative solutions. In the burning heat of the desert, Enki's fresh water, the Abzu, was the only salvation. Enki was not a bloodthirsty warrior. He was a wise engineer, a brilliant diplomat, the one who always knew how to open a path to life when every door had slammed shut. Anu governed the heavens. Enlil enforced the law. Enki sustained life. It was a perfect system. Except for one thing, the gods also had to labor. And this is where every modern conspiracy theory about the Anunnaki begins to explode. Let us open the Atrahasis epic again, one of the oldest and most haunting texts in human history. The epic does not begin with a magnificent heavenly scene. It begins with the sound of iron chains, exhaustion, and a bloody strike. The lower-ranking gods, the Igigi, had been forced to carry the burden of dredging the Tigris and Euphrates rivers for 40 years. They were exhausted. They were furious. At last, they burned their tools, threw their hoes into the mud, and marched to surround the palace of the storm god Enlil. Mesopotamian heaven stood on the brink of a divine civil war. The Anunnaki Council had to convene in an emergency. Enlil demanded violence to crush the rebellion. But Enki, the god of wisdom, stepped forward. He did not choose bloodshed. He chose a solution never before seen in the history of the universe. Create another being to carry this burden of slavery. And then the decision to create humankind was approved. Not so that we could rule the world. We were born to be workers for the gods. That act of shaping is described by Atrahasis in chilling detail. Under the direction of Enki and the birth goddess Nintu, also called Mami, they took the clay of Mesopotamia and mixed it with the blood of a slain god. Pause on that detail for a moment. Clay and divine blood. To the ancient Mesopotamians, clay was the material used to make mud bricks, temples, and the boundaries of fields. It represented lowliness, physicality, death, and the return to dust. But divine blood carried awareness power and a desire to rise toward the heavens. From the moment human beings were born, they carried within themselves a double tragedy. The body was imprisoned in the mud, while the soul writhed with the memories of a god. It is precisely at this fracture point that modern researchers entered and tore open the garment of myth. Millions of people read this ancient passage and do not see a god performing magic. They see the image of a laboratory. They translate the phrase clay mixed with divine blood into DNA implantation between extraterrestrial genetic code and native primates on Earth. In the eyes of ancient astronaut theorists, Enki is not a magical god. Enki is the head of biological research for a mining fleet. He manipulated genes to create a species intelligent enough to obey commands, yet weak enough to govern easily. That perspective is extremely fascinating because it turns history into a science fiction film. But if we stop only at the conspiracy theory of genetic intervention, we will lose the real pain of the first civilization. Because the Atrahasis epic and later the Babylonian Enuma Elish were not written as scientific reports. They were written to answer the sigh of the Mesopotamian farmer, "Why must we live such a life of suffering?" When a Sumerian farmer carried his hoe into the field under heat of 40 degrees, he needed a psychological foundation. If he thought he was only laboring to enrich the king and the ziggurat, he would rebel just like the Agigi. But if he believed I was born from the blood of a god, I am digging canals to preserve cosmic order, then that exhausting labor suddenly took on a sacred meaning. Labor was no longer exploitation. Labor became a religious ritual, and that is the most subtle cruelty of the machinery of power. It was not some genetic intervention from outer space. It was an intervention into the system of consciousness, causing all of humankind to willingly wear the yoke. Right here, the contrast between the Anunnaki dossier and the book of Genesis in the Bible begins to appear like two opposite poles of human understanding. In Mesopotamia, human beings are the product of a labor crisis created from the remnant of a rebellious God. We were born to be slaves, but in the Bible, God creates human beings in His image. He breathes the breath of life into the human nostrils and gives them authority to govern the earth. Their human beings are not production tools. Human beings have dignity, free will, and a moral covenant with the Creator. From the mud of slavery in Mesopotamia to human dignity in the Bible, there is a journey of thousands of years in the struggle to redefine our place in the universe. But the story of the Anunnaki does not stop there, because the creature born from clay and divine blood did not quietly submit like the Agigi. The noisy disturbance of humankind gradually angered the storm god Enlil, and the highest sentence was handed down to wipe out what Enki had created, a sentence known by the name the Great Flood. The Great Flood in Atrahasis and the restoration of temple order. After the story of the gods creating human beings to carry the burden of heavy labor, Mesopotamian mythology moves into an even more terrifying problem. Human beings had been created so the gods could rest from exhausting work. They dug canals, plowed fields, raised livestock, offered sacrifices, maintained temples, and kept the life of the city-state functioning. But in Atrahasis, the very humanity the gods had created began to become a new disturbance to the divine world. The population increased. The cities became more crowded. The sounds of people labored daily life, and community grew louder every day. To modern people, noise may sound like an extremely strange reason to bring down disaster. But in ancient Mesopotamian thought, that noise was more than sound. It symbolized the vitality of humankind growing beyond the calm order the gods desired. Human beings multiplied, worked, argued, built, offered sacrifices, cried out, organized communities, and turned the earth into a space full of activity. To Enlil, the god associated with command order and governing power over the earth. That noise became a sign of a world slipping out of control. Atrahasis says that Enlil was disturbed by the noise of humanity and wanted to reduce their increase. This point is very important because it shows that Mesopotamian myth views human beings in a way very different from the Bible. In the Bible, human life is connected to the image of God and a very high moral dignity. In Atrahasis, human beings are placed within a system of service to the gods. When they become too numerous and too noisy, the order of the gods is threatened. The story reflects a worldview in which human beings are both necessary and in need of control. At first, Enlil does not immediately bring the flood. He seeks to weaken humanity through disaster step by step. Disease appears, famine spreads, fields fail. Human life is squeezed at its most basic needs: health, food, drinking water, and the survival of families and communities. What a tragic and terrifying scene. The canals are still there, but the water comes at the wrong time or does not come in enough measure. The farmer goes out to the field and sees the crops weakening. The grain stores in the temple begin to shrink. Families that once received steady rations now receive less. Children cry from hunger. The elderly no longer have the strength to work. The sick lie inside their homes while priests and healers try to soothe the gods through rituals, prayers, and offerings. For a society dependent on barley irrigation water and stored reserves, famine is not only a personal hardship, it is a crisis for the entire city. If the storehouses are empty, the temple loses its ability to distribute. If the fields fail, the king loses strength. If many people die, labor declines. If rituals are interrupted, the relationship between the city-state and its patron god is also shaken in the ancient imagination. In the middle of those disasters, Enki again becomes the god who stands close to humankind. In Atrahasis, Enki does not directly confront the divine council through open rebellion. He acts through wisdom, counsel, and skillful paths within the divine system itself. When disease falls, Enki guides Atrahasis and the community to focus ritual attention on the deity connected to that disaster, so the sickness may be withdrawn. When famine threatens life, he continues to show the way for human beings to endure. The way Enki helps humanity is deeply characteristic of his role in Mesopotamian mythology. He is the god of freshwater wisdom, skill, and practical solutions. He does not represent life only in an abstract sense. He is connected to the concrete things that allow life to continue: water in the canals, timely advice, proper ritual, and the wisdom needed to pass through crisis. In a world where Enlil represents strict command, Enki often appears as the god who seeks to preserve humanity from total destruction. But the first disasters still do not solve the problem in Enlil's eyes. Human beings continue to exist. The noise continues to return. The increase of humanity continues to unsettle the divine world. Finally, the Council of the Gods reaches the most extreme decision. The Great Flood will be sent down to wipe out humanity. This decision does not appear as the sudden anger of one isolated god. It passes through the divine council, through an oath, and through a determination to keep the matters secret from humankind. The great gods agree that humanity will be destroyed. And here Enki faces a difficult boundary. He belongs to the divine council, but he is also the god who has helped Atrahasis many times. Enki must keep his oath to the gods. At the same time, he finds a way for life to continue. Atrahasis says that Enki speaks to a reed wall. He does not directly break the oath by speaking plainly to Atrahasis in the usual way. He speaks to the wall of the house so Atrahasis can hear the warning. This is a very famous detail because it shows Enki's wisdom and subtlety in the text. He honors the form of the oath while still delivering life-saving information to his righteous man. That warning is shocking. Atrahasis must tear down his house, build a boat, and bring his family craftsmen, possessions, and the living creatures that need to be preserved. The boat in the Atrahasis tradition and related Mesopotamian flood accounts is often described with a distinctive shape and measurements that differ from the familiar picture in biblical retellings. In the Babylonian tradition of the Great Flood, especially in Gilgamesh, the boat of Utnapishtim is described as a structure with equal dimensions, leading many people to call it cube-shaped. Atrahasis, Gilgamesh, and the Babylonian versions do not match in every detail. But they share one major structure: the gods decide to bring the flood. One man is warned in advance, a boat is built, family and life are preserved. The waters cover the world, and after the flood, the survivor offers a sacrifice, causing the gods to gather around the scent of the offering. When the waters recede, Atrahasis offers a sacrifice. The gods smell the offering and gather. The text describes them as hungry gods after a period without human offerings. This detail may seem strange to modern people, but for the Mesopotamians, it expressed something very basic. Gods and human beings exist in a relationship of ritual dependence. Human beings were created to work and offer sacrifice. The gods need that service so order can be maintained. After the Great Flood, the gods recognize a practical truth within their own system. If humanity is completely erased, the temples will fall silent. The offerings will stop. The fields will have no one to tend them. The canals will have no one to dredge them. The grain stores will have no one to fill them. The rituals will have no one to perform them. The divine world, as Mesopotamian myth tells, it needs human beings so its own system can continue operating. So the issue is no longer the destruction of humanity. The issue becomes the control of humanity's increase. Atrahasis ends with a new order. The gods establish limits on human life, so the population will not grow without limit as before. Ancient sources also mention elements such as the death of infants, barrenness, and groups of women or religious offices set apart from childbirth. In the Mesopotamian telling, this is a mythological explanation for very real human suffering. Why some children die early, why some families have no children, and why some people live a life of religious service instead of marriage in the usual way. The Mesopotamians did not have modern medical science to fully explain disease, infant mortality, infertility, or the biological limits of human life. They lived in a world where children could die from illness, women could face danger in childbirth, families could wait many years for children, and disease could take entire communities. The Atrahasis myth turns those sorrows into part of the order. After the Great Flood, humanity is permitted to continue living. But human life is placed within limits. This view is very different from the message of the Bible. In the Bible, the Great Flood is connected to human wickedness, God's grief over sin, Noah's righteousness, the covenant after the flood, and the sign of the rainbow as a promise. In Atrahasis, the central cause revolves around noise population growth, the burden of the gods, and the need to keep human beings within a controllable measure. Both traditions include a boat, a survivor, the preservation of animals, a great flood, and an offering after the flood. But the theology behind the two stories is very different. They are windows into how each culture understood human beings, the divine sin, labor life, and judgment. Atrahasis speaks in the language of the Mesopotamian temple, where human beings are created to labor for the gods and must be limited so divine order can remain at peace. Genesis speaks in the language of covenant righteousness and moral responsibility before God. After the Great Flood in the Mesopotamian world, religious life does not end in the memory of catastrophe. It continues in the city. The gods are placed in specific dwelling places. Enlil is associated with Nippur, a major religious center of Sumer. Enki is associated with Eridu, the ancient city connected in Mesopotamian imagination to the sweet waters of the Abzu. Inanna, or Ishtar, in Akkadian is strongly associated with Uruk, where she was worshipped as the goddess of love, war power, and urban vitality. Each city has its patron god, temple rituals, festival calendar, and sacred identity. This later made Mesopotamian religion prestigious and highly systematized. We can see that at that time and in that place, the gods were not only inside stories. They had houses in the city. Those houses were temples. The temple had land and people who cared for the daily offerings. There were people who tended the statue of the god. There were people who cleaned the sacred space. There were people who prepared bread, beer, oil, incense, meat, and textiles. There were people who sang hymns. There were people who read omens. There were people who recorded how much barley entered the storehouse. There were people who distributed rations to weavers, herders, farmers, and labor groups serving the temple. There were people trained to read, write, calculate, and copy texts. The temple therefore resembled a great institution of the city-state. It nourished ritual, managed property, created employment, maintained the education of the scribal class, and preserved textual tradition. In a civilization that wrote on clay, where tablets could survive for thousands of years if fired or preserved under suitable conditions, the temple and the state became two important environments in which writing developed. Cuneiform, from its early administrative records, gradually became the tool that preserved the memory of an entire civilization. Through it, the people of Mesopotamia could record debts, manage fields, track livestock, list laborers, copy lessons in scribal schools, record medical remedies, ritual formulas, astronomical observations, omens, myths, laws, and letters. A civilization that wanted to control water, food, labor, and ritual needed more than the power of a king. It needed memory. Clay tablets became that memory. Within the temple system, the class of priests and servants of the gods was highly diverse. There were male priests responsible for rituals, offerings, prayers, hymns, and the care of the divine statue. There were priestesses or groups of women dedicated to religious life, with different social positions depending on the city, period, and tradition. Titles such as Un-Entu Naditu Kadishtu and other functional groups appear in many Mesopotamian contexts, but we need to avoid collapsing them all into one single image. The female priest, known as En or Entu, was often connected with very high status in some traditions. Such women could belong to royal or elite families and hold an important role in the ritual life of a major god. One famous example is Enheduanna, the daughter of Sargon of Akkad, who held the high priestess office of the god Nana at Ur, and is remembered as one of the earliest named authors in the history of world literature. Her case shows that women in Mesopotamian religion could hold very high positions in certain specific environments. The Naditu were a more complex group. In the Old Babylonian period, especially at Sippar, many Naditu women came from wealthy or powerful families. They lived in a separate institution, participated in property transactions, lent money, managed land, and held a religious role connected to the god Shamash. Some Naditu groups had rules that limited childbirth or marriage in particular ways. But modern researchers emphasize that they should not be understood simply as nuns, according to a modern model. They belonged to the religious world, while also taking part in the economic and family networks of Babylonian society. This shows that the Mesopotamian temple was not only a place where men controlled ritual. Women also held important religious and economic positions, depending on the period and region. They could own property, take part in transactions, represent families in certain structures, or hold symbolic roles in the relationship between kingship and the divine. Mesopotamian society was still strongly patriarchal. But the clay tablet evidence reveals a picture far more diverse than a simple assumption would allow. Alongside everyday religious offices, major festivals played a very important role in the life of the city-state. Akitu, the New Year festival of Babylon, and some Mesopotamian traditions, is a prominent example. This festival was connected to the restoration of order, the honoring of the patron god, the procession of divine statues, the recitation of epic tradition, the ritual role of the king, and the renewal of the city before a new cycle of time. In Babylon, under Marduk, Akitu became a major ritual that affirmed Marduk's supreme position and reconfirmed the king's role within the divine order. For the people, Akitu was not only a holiday. It was the moment when the whole city looked again at the relationship between God, king, and community. The statue of the god was carried in procession. Rituals were performed. The king entered a sequence of actions that signified submission before the patron god, and then received renewed confirmation of his right to rule. The entire city-state was brought into a new cycle, where the old order was renewed and the bond with the divine was affirmed before everyone. Another ritual often mentioned is the sacred marriage, or hieros gamos. This topic needs to be told carefully. In some Sumerian traditions, especially those connected to Inanna and Dumuzi songs and rituals, describe the union between the goddess and the king, or a male divine figure. This ritual is often understood as a way to affirm fertility, abundance harvests, and the legitimacy of kingship. But scholars still discuss the extent to which the ritual was performed in a literal, symbolic, literary, or liturgical sense in different periods. The safer and deeper way to tell it is to view hieros gamos as a ritual connecting kingship with the fertility and prosperity of the land. The king did not rule only through armies and laws. In the Mesopotamian world, the king needed to be placed within the sacred order of the gods. If Inanna was the goddess of vitality, love, war, and power, then the ritual union between the king and the goddess in the texts could express that the reign was being connected to the fertility of the land, the prosperity of the city-state, and the approval of the patron deity. All of this shows that after the Great Flood, Mesopotamian myth does not only explain why human beings survived, it also explains why human beings must continue living within a temple system. Human beings were created to labor for the gods. When humanity increased too greatly, the gods placed limits on life. When the Great Flood passed, the offerings of the survivor made the gods recognize the indispensable role of human beings within ritual order. From that point, the city temple priesthood king. Festivals and labor became tightly connected parts of Mesopotamian life. This is a world very different from how modern people often think about religion. For many people today, religion is a matter of personal belief, weekend ritual, or private spiritual life. For the ancient Mesopotamians, religion was inside everything. The way fields were measured, the way food was distributed, the way the king received authority, the way physicians read signs of illness, the way scribes learned writing, the way weavers made cloth for the temple, the way farmers viewed the water season, and the way the whole city entered a new year. A flood could be a sign that the gods were angry. A good harvest could show that order was being maintained. An illness could require prayers, rituals, remedies, and the intervention of a specialist. A new king needed confirmation before the god. A prosperous city had to care for its temple. From this perspective, the Anunnaki and the great gods did not live only in ancient stories. They were present in the entire way society was organized. A Sumerian or Babylonian citizen may not have debated mythology the way modern people do. For them, the divine was the foundation of life. The temple stood there. Offerings were presented every day. Clay tablets recorded the names of workers. Canals were dredged. The king built ziggurats. Priests recited prayers. The sick sought healers. All these activities took place under an order they believed had been established by the gods. And it is here that the story of the Anunnaki becomes far deeper and far more truthful than sensational theories. If we only ask whether they were extraterrestrials, we may miss an entire civilization emerging behind the clay tablets. The more meaningful question is this: why did the people of Mesopotamia build their entire society around the idea that human beings lived to serve divine order? Why were labor, reproduction, disease, war, and ritual all placed in relationship with the gods? Why do the stories of the Great Flood end with the restoration of limits upon humanity and the renewed role of offerings? Atrahasis answers in a deeply Mesopotamian way. Human beings are necessary because the gods need labor and offerings. Human beings become dangerous when they increase too greatly and disturb the calm of the divine realm. Human beings are preserved after the flood, but their lives are placed under limits: lifespan, reproduction, disease, death, and special religious roles. The temple becomes the place where that relationship is maintained every day. From here, the next part of the Anunnaki dossier can move into an even more controversial question. When the clay tablets say human beings were created to labor for the gods, are they telling a religious myth about the human condition? Or are they preserving the memory of an event that modern people interpret as genetic intervention? To answer that, we need to step into the center of the modern debate, the way 20th century authors read Atrahasis Enuma, Elish, Enki, Ninhursag, divine blood clay, the Igigi, and the Anunnaki as traces of an ancient experiment. But before we go there, the historical foundation is now clear. In the Mesopotamian world, the Great Flood is a story about the noise of humanity. The anger of Enlil, the wisdom of Enki, the boat of Atrahasis, the offering after the flood, and the new order that limits human life. After that disaster, the temple becomes the center where human beings continue their part, laboring, offering sacrifices, learning, writing, healing sickness, keeping rituals, serving the patron god, and sustaining the life of the city-state. Their myth and history are recorded together and preserved on small clay tablets. On one level, they tell of gods, the boat, the Great Flood, and the heavenly council of Mesopotamia. On another level, they reflect the very real lives of people who dug canals, kept records, offered barley, lived under kings, and tried to understand why the world could both sustain them and crush them through sudden disasters. That is the true power of the Atrahasis story. It does not only say that a flood happened. It says that from very early in history, human beings looked at labor, suffering, reproduction, disease, death, and religion, and asked, why have we been placed in this world, and who is deciding the limits of human life? Because when modern people read about clay mixed with divine blood gods exhausted from labor, Enki intervening to protect humanity, and an order established after the flood, they begin to look at the clay tablets with different eyes. For scholars, this is a Mesopotamian myth about origins and social order. For modern Anunnaki theories, it may be the first fragment of a far bolder dossier. Human beings were created, adjusted, limited, and managed by powers the Sumerians called gods. The rise of Babylon and the Assyrian Empire. After the Great Flood in the Mesopotamian traditions, divine life and city-state life continued to be tightly bound together. Cities worshipped their own patron gods. Temples managed rituals, grain stores labor and textual memory. Kingship was understood as a gift from the divine realm, while kings strengthened their position by building temples, offering sacrifices, defeating enemies, and raising the name of their city's patron god to a higher position within the entire pantheon. In that world, when a city rose, the god of that city rose as well. That is the famous city of Babylon, one of the most luxurious cities of the ancient world. At first, Babylon was only one city within the vast network of Mesopotamia. But as Babylon's political power grew, especially from the Old Babylonian period, and later within Babylonian religious tradition, the god Marduk began to be elevated to the center. The rise of Marduk in mythology reflects the rise of Babylon on the political map. When the city became a great power, its patron god was also retold as the god powerful enough to stand at the head of the divine council. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, is the most important text for this change. The story opens with a crisis in the world of the gods. Tiamat, the primordial sea goddess, becomes the force threatening the order of the younger gods. The other gods fear her power. At that moment, Marduk steps forward as a young god full of strength, wisdom, and rightful ambition, according to the way the Babylonian text presents him. He agrees to confront Tiamat, but he demands something very great. If he wins, the gods must give him supreme authority. This is the moment when mythology and politics become one. Marduk goes into battle as the warrior of Babylon. He uses weapon storms and strategy to defeat Tiamat. After the victory, he splits Tiamat's body to establish the structure of the universe, arranges heaven and earth, sets new orders for the world, and is then exalted by the divine council as king of the gods. In Babylonian language, Marduk's victory explains why Babylon and its patron god deserve to stand at the center. For the Babylonians, the Enuma Elish was more than a story about the origin of the universe in a narrative sense. It was a religious declaration about the power of Babylon. When Marduk defeats Tiamat, he brings a new order into the world. When the gods give authority to Marduk, they confirm the supreme status of Babylon's god. When human beings are created to serve the gods, in a later part of this tradition, the Babylonian universe is placed into a system with a clear center. Marduk rules, Babylon is exalted, and the order of the gods is reorganized under the authority of the victorious god. From the viewpoint of ancient people, the patron god of a city also carried the honor of that city itself. A small city-state had a local god. A great power needed a god large enough to cover its political ambition. For that reason, Marduk in the Enuma Elish becomes the divine image of imperial Babylon. Strong, intelligent, recognized by the divine council, able to establish order for the universe and assign roles to other gods. This helps us understand why Mesopotamian mythology always preserves important historical echoes. Anu still keeps the appearance of high heavenly authority. Enlil still carries the legacy of ancient Sumerian order. Enki or Ea continues to be remembered as the wise god connected with fresh water and solutions. But when Babylon rises, Marduk steps into the position that Enlil had once held in many traditions. The pantheon is rearranged to reflect a new political order. A Babylonian citizen attending the Akitu festival would have felt this very clearly. During the New Year festival, the Enuma Elish was read or reenacted within a ritual setting. The story of Marduk defeating Tiamat helped the community enter the new year with the belief that order had been renewed. The king of Babylon stood before his patron god. The city reaffirmed its central position. The people saw the power of king, temple, and deity joined together in a shared ritual. Myth therefore became political power. It told the people who stood at the center. It taught the whole city how to understand the power of the king. It placed military victory, cosmic order harvests, and ritual into the same story. Marduk was not merely a god added to the list of divine beings. He was the symbol of the period when Babylon took the leading role in the Mesopotamian imagination. From this point, older traditions were reread. Older gods were rearranged, and ancient stories were placed into a new structure in which Babylon stood at the center. Then history continued to shift northward. Assyria rose. If Babylon built theological power around Marduk, Assyria built its imperial identity around Ashur. At first, Ashur was connected to the city of the same name, an ancient center in Upper Mesopotamia. As Assyria developed from a regional kingdom into a massive military empire, Ashur also moved beyond the position of a local patron god and became the national god of the Assyrians. In the Assyrian imagination, Ashur stood behind the campaigns of conquest. Assyrian kings often presented their military campaigns as missions given by Ashur. When armies marched out from Nineveh, Kalhu-dur-Sharukin, or other royal centers, war was described as an act of expanding Ashur's power. The enemies of Assyria became enemies of the order protected by Ashur. Victory on the battlefield was understood as proof that Assyria's supreme god was supporting the king. This was a religion of empire. Assyria was famous for its military strength, administrative system, forced deportations, palace art battle reliefs, and powerful royal propaganda. In the inscriptions of Assyrian kings, we often see them introduce themselves as chosen by the gods beloved of Ashur, entrusted with the task of defeating enemies, expanding borders, and bringing nations under Assyrian rule. Ashur therefore did not stand only in the temple. He marched with the army. He entered the inscriptions of victory. He was present in the way the king explained the right of conquest. If Marduk of Babylon was the god who defeated Tiamat to establish cosmic order, Ashur of Assyria became the god who commanded empire, protected military power, and supported the expansionist ambition of Assyrian kings. The rise of Ashur also shows the same principle that appeared with Marduk. When a political power rises, its patron god is elevated in theology. Under the Assyrian kings, Ashur was at times identified with Enlil, the god who had once held supreme authority in Sumerian tradition. Later, in some theological tendencies, he was also connected with Anshar, a figure in Babylonian creation mythology. These identifications helped place Ashur among the highest positions of the Mesopotamian pantheon, matching Assyria's ambition on earth. This makes the religious history of Mesopotamia deeply alive. The pantheon changes according to the map of power. Nippur once elevated Enlil as the great religious center of Sumer. Babylon raised Marduk to the position of king of the gods. Assyria placed Ashur in the role of supreme god of a military empire. Each time a political center rose, the divine story was retold in a way that gave that center a greater position. This allowed the king to rule through more than an army. He ruled through mythology, ritual titles, inscriptions, festivals, and the collective memory of the people. But Assyria did not leave behind only war and endless struggle. One of Assyria's greatest legacies lies in the preservation of knowledge. The most important name here is Ashurbanipal, the king who ruled the Neo-Assyrian Empire in the 7th century before Christ. He is remembered as one of the most learned Assyrian kings. While many kings boasted of victories, lion hunts, and palace construction, Ashurbanipal also boasted of his ability to read, write, understand ancient texts, master the knowledge of the scribal class, and collect clay tablets from across Mesopotamia. At Nineveh, his capital, a vast treasure of texts was gathered. Today we call it the Royal Library of Ashurbanipal. More than 30,000 clay tablets and cuneiform fragments have been found in the area of Nineveh. They contain all kinds of texts, myths, epics, rituals, prayers, omens, astronomy, medicine, vocabulary, scholarly lists, letters, administrative records, and famous literary works. Among them are copies of the Epic of Gilgamesh traditions about the Great Flood creation, texts, lists of gods, and many sources that help modern people reconstruct the religious imagination of Mesopotamia. If Assyria had only conquered and then vanished, our understanding of Mesopotamia would be far poorer. But because of Ashurbanipal's ambition to collect knowledge fragments of memory from Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria, were copied, gathered, stored, and finally buried beneath the ruins of Nineveh after the city fell at the end of the 7th century before Christ. That very collapse unintentionally helped preserve many clay tablets. Fire and falling bricks could destroy palaces, but clay, when baked by fire, became harder, preserving cuneiform writing for many centuries afterward. This image is truly striking. An empire that once terrified many peoples finally collapsed in war. Palaces were destroyed. City walls were broken. But in the archive rooms, small clay tablets still preserve the voices of a world far older than Assyria itself. Thanks to Nineveh, modern scholars can read Gilgamesh, Atrahasis, and Enuma Elish texts about the gods' rituals and traditions connected to the Anunnaki. Many things people debate today about Mesopotamia, from the Great Flood to the creation of humanity, from the Divine Council to the role of Marduk, have come down to us through later copies preserved within the Babylonian and Assyrian scribal environment. The Library of Ashurbanipal is therefore a major turning point in the history of the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki gods belong to older traditions, but the memory of them was preserved through the hands of scribes, schools, temples, and finally the Royal Textual Archive of Assyria. A story born in southern Mesopotamia could be copied in Babylon, carried to Nineveh, and then excavated thousands of years later by archaeologists. From there it entered museums, research rooms, scholarly translations, popular books, and even modern theories about the origin of humankind. This is the long journey of a clay tablet. It may begin in the hands of a young scribe, learning how to press signs into soft clay. It may be copied from an older tablet in a temple. It may be sent to the palace of the Assyrian king as part of a collection of knowledge. It may be broken when Nineveh burns. It may lie beneath the earth for more than 2,000 years. Then one day, it is excavated, read again, translated into modern languages, and becomes evidence showing how deeply the people of Mesopotamia thought about gods, human beings, labor floods, kingship, and cosmic order. From Babylon to Assyria, we see that Mesopotamian mythology always moves together with power. Marduk is elevated when Babylon becomes the center. Ashur is elevated when Assyria becomes an empire. Ashurbanipal collects texts because knowledge is also a form of power. An empire that controls land, controls taxes, armies, and trade routes. But an empire that controls textual memory can also control how the past is retold. how the gods are honored, how omens are interpreted, and how the king understands himself within the order of the world. This is very important for the Anunnaki dossier. The Anunnaki did not exist within a motionless mythology. Their name, their roles, and their place in the pantheon were transmitted through many periods, many cities, and many different centers of power. Sumer laid the foundation. Akkad brought a Semitic language into older traditions. Babylon elevated Marduk above the gods. Assyria placed Ashur in the position of national god and preserved the massive textual archive at Nineveh. Because of those movements, the story of the Anunnaki passed through many layers of history. They belonged to Sumerian temples. They entered Akkadian texts. They were repositioned within Babylonian order. They were copied in the Assyrian environment. Then they were rediscovered in the modern age, when archaeologists opened the mounds of Iraq and found clay tablets covered with cuneiform writing. From this perspective, Babylon and Assyria play different roles, but both are extremely important. Babylon turned Marduk into king of the gods, using mythology to explain the rise of the city and place cosmic order under the authority of its patron god. Assyria turned Ashur into the supreme god of a military empire, while also gathering and preserving the texts that helped Mesopotamian memory survive the fall of that very empire. One side rearranged the pantheon around Marduk. The other preserved the library where older traditions continued to be read and copied. And it is because of these two processes that many stories about the Mesopotamian gods have reached us today. When modern people speak about the Anunnaki, they often imagine they are looking directly into the original Sumerian age. In reality, many of the texts we read passed through the hands of Babylonian and Assyrian scribes. They were copied, memorized, edited, preserved, and placed within the knowledge archives of later empires. Therefore, the Anunnaki dossier we have today is the result of an entire chain of preservation lasting thousands of years. This shows that this historical account is far deeper than it first appears. The Anunnaki are not only the name of an ancient group of gods, they are part of the stream of Mesopotamian memory, moving from Sumerian city-states to Babylon, from Babylon to Assyria, from Assyria to the Library of Nineveh, and then from Nineveh to the desks of modern scholars. Marduk shows that mythology can raise a city to the center of the universe. Ashur shows that empire can transform a patron god into a symbol of war and rule. Ashurbanipal shows that power can also lie in collecting, copying, and controlling knowledge. And the clay tablets buried beneath Nineveh are not only archaeological artifacts. They are what remains of a long struggle to preserve memory. Within them are the voices of the gods, the anxieties of kings, the lessons of scribes, the rituals of temples, the story of the great flood, the rise of Marduk, the authority of Ashur, and scattered fragments of the Anunnaki dossier. And when those clay tablets were read again in the modern age, a new transformation began. Myths that once served temples and palaces now entered research books, museums, documentaries, novels, ancient theories, and debates about the origin of humankind. Marduk, Ashur, Enki, Enlil, and the Anunnaki left the textual archives of the scribes and became figures in the global imagination. The rise of Babylon and Assyria is therefore a very important chapter. It explains why the Anunnaki cannot be understood through only one period. These gods lived within the memory of a civilization that was always changing. When the city changed, the pantheon changed. When the empire changed, the supreme god also changed. When the royal library gathered texts, old traditions were preserved in new forms. From here, the story prepares to move into another dramatic development. After Marduk was elevated in Babylon, after Ashur became the supreme symbol of Assyria, and after Ashurbanipal gathered clay tablets at Nineveh, the Mesopotamian texts entered a long sleep beneath the earth, more than 2,000 years later. When modern human beings excavated them, translated them, and read them again with new questions, the Anunnaki began to have an entirely different life, from gods of ancient temples into the center of bold theories about the origin of humanity. The Hellenistic period and cultural interaction. After Assyria and Babylon passed through their ages of glory, Mesopotamia entered a new stage. The cities that had once belonged to Mesopotamian kings gradually came under the rule of larger empires, Persia, then Macedonia, and then the Hellenistic dynasties. In 331 before Christ, Alexander the Great defeated King Darius III of Persia at the Battle of Gaugamela. Not long afterward, he entered Babylon. A clay tablet belonging to the Babylonian astronomical diaries even records the event of Alexander entering the city, showing that local scribes continued to observe record and preserve political events in cuneiform, even after world power had changed hands. Babylon, at that time, was still an ancient center rich with memory, where temples, clay tablets, astronomers, and old rituals continued to exist amid the new wave of power from the West. Alexander's conquest did not only change the map, it opened a period of deep interaction between Greek culture and the ancient civilizations of the Near East. After Alexander died in 323 before Christ, his empire was divided among his generals. The region of Babylon and most of Mesopotamia later came under the authority of Seleucus and the Seleucid dynasty. From this point, the Greek language, the Greek model of the city, Greek art, Greek philosophy, and new forms of administration began to enter the land that had once belonged to Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria. But the old culture did not disappear immediately after the Greeks arrived. The Babylonian temples still operated. The scribes still wrote in cuneiform. Astronomers still observed the sky, recording the positions of planets. Solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, barley prices, river levels, weather, and political events. Scholarly families in Babylon and Uruk continued to pass down their craft, copy ancient texts, calculate calendars, create astronomical tables, and interpret omens. The life around them began to change day by day. The Babylonian temples were still there. The scribes still wrote in cuneiform. But on the streets, people began to see Greek officials' coins bearing the image of Greek kings, merchants from distant regions, and new names being applied to the old gods. A Babylonian living in the Seleucid period could live in a city where officials used Greek coins, carried the image of a Greek king, while the local temple still offered sacrifices to Marduk, Nabu, Ishtar, or the traditional gods. A scribe could continue writing clay tablets in cuneiform, while merchants or officials might use Aramaic or Greek in administrative life. Those layers of language and culture coexisted for a long time. In that setting, the Greeks began to view the Babylonian gods through their own familiar mythological system. A local god whose power resembled Zeus, Apollo, or Artemis would be placed alongside the corresponding Greek name, so the two cultures could understand each other more easily. When the Greeks encountered local gods, they often tried to identify them through their own pantheon. This was a common habit in the ancient world. A local god could be viewed as corresponding to a Greek god if their powers, functions, or status seemed close to one another. In that historical context, Marduk, the great god of Babylon, could be compared with Zeus, the supreme god of the Greek pantheon. Nabu, the god of writing, wisdom, scribes, and knowledge, could be connected with Apollo, the god associated with prophecy, knowledge order, and sacred arts in Greek tradition. Calling Marduk by the name Zeus or placing Nabu near Apollo was not only a matter of changing names to make them easier to remember. It shows that the Greeks were trying to understand the Babylonian gods through what was already familiar to them. When they saw Marduk as the chief god of Babylon, they immediately connected him with Zeus, the supreme god in Greek mythology. When they saw Nabu connected with writing knowledge and prophecy, they placed him near Apollo. For the Babylonians, this way of naming could also be useful in a world that had changed rulers. The old temples could continue to be respected because the local gods were now explained in a language that the Greek ruling class could understand. Because of this, Marduk, Nabu, and many other ancient gods still had a place in religious life, even though political power had passed into the hands of Hellenistic dynasties. Marduk in Babylon had once been elevated as king of the gods through the Enuma Elish. Zeus in the Greek world was also the chief god on Olympus. Therefore, the connection between Marduk and Zeus came from the supreme status of both figures within their two pantheons. Nabu was also very suitable to be connected with Apollo, because Nabu was the god of writing wisdom and the scribal profession, while Apollo was connected with prophecy knowledge, poetry, and the majesty of divine speech in the Greek world. But when the gods were identified with one another, the role of Mesopotamian state religion also began to change. In the Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian periods, the temple had stood at the very center of city-state power and kingship. The king built temples, offered sacrifices, confirmed his right to rule before the patron god, while the temple managed property workers, grain stores, and rituals. In the Seleucid period, the highest political power lay in the hands of a Hellenistic dynasty, with armies, coinage, new cities, and an administrative network wider than traditional Babylon. The temples still had a role, but their weight within the order of the state changed. The ancient cities continued to maintain rituals, but the world around them had opened onto a much larger stage. The Seleucid Empire stretched across many people's languages and traditions of worship. A city's patron god no longer held the same political role as in the time of a Sumerian city-state or a Babylonian empire centered on that very god. Local religion entered the life of a multi-centered empire where power was negotiated between the king officials, Greek cities, native temples, and local elite groups. In that context, another movement rose more strongly: astrology. The Babylonians had observed the sky for a very long time, before the Hellenistic period. Scribes and astronomers recorded the movements of the moon, the sun, the planet's solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, and many signs in the heavens. In earlier periods, heavenly omens were often understood in relation to the king, the land, the harvest war, or the destiny of the community. An astronomical event could be read as a sign for the court, for the region, or for the city-state. In the late Babylonian and Hellenistic periods, a new type of astrology developed: the personal birth chart based on the moment of birth. This was a very great shift in the history of a people. Instead of only asking what the sky was announcing for the king or the nation, human beings began to ask what the sky was saying about their own lives. At what moment was a child born, under what position of the moon? Which planet stood in which sign? What sign governed that birth date? All of these things began to be recorded in order to create a horoscope, a personal chart in the ancient sense. Modern researchers recognize that forms of personal astrology developed strongly in the late Babylonian period, then became an important foundation for later Hellenistic astrology. This change fit the psychology of the age. In a vast imperial world, people could easily feel smaller than before. The old city lost its central position. The local king was replaced by a foreign king. A new language entered administration. Trade routes expanded. People lived among many gods, many philosophies, many traditions, and many layers of power. When the old order no longer surrounded life the way it once had, human beings began to seek answers that were closer to their personal fate. A father wanted to know the future of his child. A merchant wanted to choose a favorable day for a shipment. A sick person wanted to understand what the signs in the sky had to do with their fate. A family wanted to know whether a marriage, childbirth, a distant journey, or a major life decision was aligned with the proper time. Personal astrology answered exactly that need. It brought the sky down from the palace into the private life of each person. What had once served the king and the state gradually became a tool through which ordinary people, especially those with money and access to scholars, sought meaning for their own lives. Babylon held a pioneering role in this transformation. Babylonian astronomers did not observe the sky through vague inspiration. They recorded consistently calculated cycles, built data tables, tracked planetary positions, and developed predictive methods that were highly sophisticated for their time. Clay tablets on astronomy and astrology show a long technical and inherited tradition of observation. A late Babylonian clay tablet, now held at the British Museum, records a list of months and zodiac signs, showing that the zodiac system had entered cuneiform writing in the late period. The Greeks received a great deal from that tradition. When Babylonian knowledge met Greek mathematics, philosophy, and models of the cosmos, Hellenistic astrology began to develop into a wider system. The planet's zodiac signs, birth times, the structure of the heavens, and the meanings of celestial positions were brought into a new language. Later, that system spread into the Roman world, Egypt, Syria, and many other regions around the Mediterranean. Studies on the history of astrology often recognize that Hellenistic and late antique astrology were built upon a Babylonian foundation combined with Egyptian influence and Greek philosophical thought. This creates a very fascinating historical paradox. Ancient Mesopotamian gods, such as Marduk, Nabu, Ishtar, Enlil, Enki, and the Anunnaki gradually lost their central role within the life of the wider empire. But the Babylonian scholars themselves, those who had once served within the tradition of temples and cuneiform writing, helped create a new system of knowledge whose influence reached far beyond their homeland. Temple religion gradually weakened, but Babylonian astronomical knowledge continued to live. The state rituals of the old city-states slowly lost their former position. But the Babylonian way of measuring the sky, dividing signs, calculating cycles, and reading omens entered the flow of Hellenistic culture. Clay tablets from scribal classrooms became the foundation for astrological texts written in Greek. Observations that had once served kings and temples began to serve the questions of individuals. What order does my life belong to? Along with astrology magic and personal ritual practices also developed within that blended world. In ancient Mesopotamia, magic in the ancient sense was not separated from religion and medicine in the way modern people often imagine. A sick person might need medicine incantations, prayers, rituals to drive away evil forces, and the intervention of a religious specialist. Exorcists, diviners, omen readers, physicians, and scribes all belonged to the network of ancient knowledge. As the world moved into the Hellenistic period, these traditions met Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Syrian practices, creating a multi-layered religious environment. And gradually they forgot the gods who had given them birth and protection. Instead, human beings blindly placed their faith in amulets and empty divinations. They believed that an amulet could be used to protect against illness. A ritual could be performed to fight a curse. A birth chart could be drawn to understand fate. A prayer could be addressed to many gods within systems that had been blended together. In that world, the ancient Mesopotamian gods did not disappear in one simple straight line. Some names continued to live in local rituals. Some were identified with Greek gods. Some entered magic astrology or scholarly texts. Some gradually became the memory of the scribal class, preserved more in clay tablets than in daily political power. Nabu is a very noteworthy example. He was the god of writing scribes and wisdom, the son of Marduk in Babylonian tradition. When he was connected with Apollo in the Hellenistic environment, Nabu did not merely receive a new name in Greek understanding. He entered a new network of meaning, where Babylonian knowledge met the Greek ideal of prophecy art and wisdom. This identification shows how gods could become bridges between different traditions. Marduk was the same. Marduk had once stood at the center of Babylon as king of the gods, the one who defeated Tiamat and established order. When compared with Zeus, he was placed within the common language of the Greek world. Zeus was the chief god of Olympus, connected with rule thunder and divine order. Marduk and Zeus were not the same god in their origins, but their identification helped translate Marduk's power into a symbolic system the Greeks could understand. This is the nature of the Hellenistic period in Mesopotamia. Traditions did not stand apart like sealed walls. They touched, borrowed, reinterpreted, renamed, preserved the old, and created the new. A Babylonian temple could continue ancient rituals while outside the city. Seleucid power used coins armies and the Greek language. A Babylonian scholar could read clay tablets in cuneiform, while his knowledge of the sky could enter Greek books. A Mesopotamian god could be identified with a Greek god in order to fit the life of a multicultural empire. For the Anunnaki, this period marks an important transition. In the centuries of Sumer-Akkad Babylon and Assyria, the Anunnaki belonged to the pantheon, the divine council fate, the underworld, and traditional religious structures. In the Hellenistic period, their name no longer held the same prominent role as Marduk, Nabu, Ishtar, or gods with powerful temples, but the memory of the divine world to which they belonged continued to live through texts, rituals, astrology magic, and late cuneiform copies. In other words, the Anunnaki entered the memory and cultural history of an entire people. They were no longer the center of state power in the style of ancient Babylon. They became part of the Mesopotamian heritage that scholars, scribes, and temples still held. As cuneiform gradually lost its place before Aramaic and Greek, the traditions of the ancient gods also entered a period of contraction. Even so, clay tablets continued to be written in some centers such as Babylon and Uruk until very late, proving that local scholars still tried to preserve the ancient tradition in a world whose language was changing. Try to imagine a Babylonian scholar in the Seleucid period sitting in the temple district with a wet clay tablet before him. Outside, the world is speaking more and more in Greek. Kings carry Greek names. Coins bear Greek symbols. New cities rise according to the Greek model. But inside that scholarly room, the scribe still writes cuneiform signs, still calculates the movement of the moon, still reads heavenly omens, still copies lists of gods, and still preserves fragments of memory stretching from Sumer to Babylon. That person is living between two ages, an old age of temples, clay tablets, Marduk, Nabu, and the Mesopotamian gods. A new age of Hellenistic dynasties, multicultural cities, philosophy, personal astrology, and private questions about the fate of each individual. From this interaction, Mesopotamian traditions entered a new life beyond their original homeland. Babylonian astrology deeply influenced Hellenistic astrology. Babylonian astronomical observations contributed to the development of the science of the heavens in the Greek world. The names of gods could be changed according to the Greek system, but the old layers of knowledge and symbolism continued to flow through texts, rituals, and personal practices. For this reason, the Hellenistic period was not only a period of decline for Mesopotamian religion, it was also a period of transformation. Temple power gradually weakened within the new political structure, but Babylonian scholars preserved a very important part of the ancient heritage. The gods were identified with Greek gods, but the memory of them did not disappear from texts. Personal astrology and magic rose, bringing questions of fate from the palace and city-state into the private life of each person. A person living in Mesopotamia during the Seleucid period could see the world through many layers of belief at once. They could know Marduk as the great god of Babylon. They could also hear the Greeks speak of him in language close to Zeus. They could offer sacrifices in the local temple. They could also ask a scholar about a birth date, heavenly signs, family destiny, or the favorable time for a major decision. This was a world that was no longer purely Sumerian, purely Babylonian, or purely Greek. It was a zone of interaction where old gods were translated into new names. Ancient techniques were used for new needs, and questions about the universe began to move closer to each individual. And from here, Mesopotamian tradition began to leave its role as state religion in the ancient sense and enter other paths: scholarship, astrology, magic, scribal copies, and finally, archaeological memory. As cuneiform gradually fell silent, the Mesopotamian gods were no longer widely worshipped as they had been in the Babylonian and Assyrian periods. But the clay tablets remained beneath the earth, preserving those names for a much later age. Marduk had once been identified with Zeus. Nabu had once been connected with Apollo. Babylonian scholars had once provided the foundation for Hellenistic astrology. And the traditions about the Anunnaki, even as they receded deep into the layer of ancient texts, still waited for the day they would be excavated, translated again, and brought into the modern imagination. The Hellenistic period is therefore the bridge between two worlds. On one side is ancient Mesopotamia, with temples, ziggurats, clay tablets, the divine council and gods, such as Anu Enlil, Enki Marduk, Nabu Ishtar, and the Anunnaki. On the other side is the wider Mediterranean world, where the Greek language philosophy, personal astrology magic, mixed religion and multicultural kingdoms together created a new setting. On that bridge, the Mesopotamian gods were given new names, while Babylonian knowledge was carried into the larger current of the ancient world. This is why when we speak about the Anunnaki, we cannot stop only at the Sumerian or Babylonian periods. Their story passes through Assyria, enters the Hellenistic period, and then slowly leaves public worship to become textual memory. After many centuries, those very memories would return in the modern age when the clay tablets were excavated and people began to ask new questions of them. Are these gods religious symbols, political memories, astronomical knowledge, or something even more mysterious hidden in the way the ancients told the story of human origins? The academic revival of Assyriology and the Anunnaki ancient astronaut theory. The great flood sentence of the storm god Enlil drowned everything. When the waters receded, the great civilization of Mesopotamia gradually faded and was buried beneath meters of sand and dust. For nearly 2,000 years, names such as Anu Enlil Enki and the Anunnaki Council completely vanished from human memory. The Western world embraced the Bible-built new empires and believed that history truly began with the Hebrews and the Greeks. But the clay tablets could not be burned away. They were only waiting patiently. Let us fast forward through time and land in Europe of the 19th century. This was the age of ambitious explorers and of a completely new scientific field, Assyriology. This journey to resurrect the past did not take place inside gentle libraries. It was paid for with blood and daring. The British officer Henry Rawlinson risked his life hanging from the steep cliffs of Behistun in Persia, just to copy strange symbols. Building on the foundation laid by the scholar Georg Grotefend Rawlinson, broke the code of time. The greatest linguistic veil of the ancient world was officially torn open. Mud bricks that had been silent for thousands of years could finally speak to the modern world. And then an event occurred that shook the entire foundation of Western faith. It was an afternoon in 1872 inside the stifling room of the British Museum. The researcher George Smith was bent over a broken piece of clay. When he joined the signs together and translated them into a modern language, his eyes widened. George Smith gasped for breath. According to witnesses, he became so overwhelmed that he jumped to his feet, tore off his coat, and ran around the room in utter astonishment. Why would a scholar lose control like that? Because the piece of clay in his hand, Tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh, was describing in detail a great flood. There was a man warned by the gods in a dream, there was a massive boat, and there were animals brought aboard to preserve their kinds. That story looked almost exactly like Noah's Ark in the Bible. But this clay tablet was thousands of years older than the biblical text. That shock of recognition ignited one of the greatest archaeological fevers in history. Expedition after expedition rushed into the deserts of Iraq. Robert Koldewey excavated and found the remains of the glorious city of Babylon. Leonard Woolley uncovered the city of Ur, bringing back blood-soaked artifacts from the royal tombs. And finally, the father of Sumerology, the scholar Samuel Noah Kramer, devoted his life to organizing tens of thousands of fragments. The Mesopotamian mythological system was officially reconstructed. The Anunnaki Council, after being buried alive for 2,000 years, once again stood beneath the sunlight. However, the return of the Anunnaki took an extremely strange turn when popular culture stepped in. In the 1970s, two names appeared: Zechariah Sitchin and Erich von Däniken. They brought forward an unprecedented theory, the ancient astronaut theory. Through his famous series of books, the 12th planet Sitchin declared that the Anunnaki were not gods. They were an extraterrestrial race from Nibiru, a planet with a massive orbit around the solar system. The atmosphere of Nibiru was deteriorating, forcing the Anunnaki to come to Earth 400,000 years ago to mine gold in order to repair their atmosphere. When the Igigi labor force became exhausted and rebelled, these extraterrestrial scientists used genetic editing technology, splicing their DNA with that of native primates on Earth to create a new slave species. That species was human beings. This theory was so perfect for the imagination that it swept across the world. It filled gaps in the theory of evolution. Millions of books were sold, and documentary films exploited the idea again and again. But there is one truth that the media rarely reveals to you. Scholars, archaeologists, and the people who truly hold the linguistic keys of Mesopotamia have completely rejected this theory. Modern Assyriology is not guesswork. Scientists have built dictionaries and mastered the grammar and syntax of Sumerian and Akkadian. When compared with the original texts, many of Sitchin's pieces of evidence fall apart. First, the word Anunnaki absolutely does not mean those who came from heaven to earth, as Sitchin freely embroidered it. It carries the meaning of royal offspring or noble seeds. Second, there is not a single cuneiform sign that describes Nibiru as a strange inhabited planet. In Babylonian astronomy, Nibiru is a term used for a crossing point in the sky or is associated with Jupiter. And most importantly, tens of thousands of tablets are completely silent about concepts such as genetic technology, spacecraft, or gold mining. Sitchin made a fatal mistake in research. He took the mindset of the Cold War era with its obsessions about flying saucers and science fiction and threw it backward into a world of 5,000 years ago. We are living in an age when believing in an extraterrestrial fleet seems easier than acknowledging the greatness of our own ancestors. Many people refuse to believe that ancient human beings, using only mud and bare hands, could build a profound theological philosophy or raise great ziggurat structures. But let us slow down for a moment and look deeper into the nature of the problem. When we remove the science fiction covering the truth about the Anunnaki, does not lose its weight. On the contrary, it becomes far deeper and far more worthy of reflection. The story of clay mixed with divine blood in the Atrahasis epic is not a laboratory record. It is a philosophical masterpiece of humanity. The ancients wanted to send a message: your body may be confined to dust, and you may have to bend under the heavy responsibilities of life, just as the Igigi gods had to dig canals in order to survive. But deep within you, you carry a portion of the blood of sacred life. You have the desire to be free to ask questions and to perceive the universe. But think about it for a moment. If we look broadly at the whole picture of human history, we will see that this origin from mud is not a story belonging only to Mesopotamia. Open the Bible, the book of Genesis. God created the first human being from the dust of the ground. Even the name Adam comes from Adama, which in ancient Hebrew means red earth. Look to Greece. Their mythology says that Prometheus shaped humankind from mud. In ancient Egypt, the ram-headed god Khnum shaped us on a potter's wheel from the black mud of the Nile. And in the distant East, the legend of Nuwa kneading yellow clay to create human beings carries the very same resonance. Many great civilizations separated by thousands of miles, divided by oceans and deserts, with no direct contact with one another, still share the same pattern of origin. Were it me, I would also ask, why does this strange similarity exist? Could an extraterrestrial fleet have traveled around the world, performing the same implantation procedure? No, the truth is far more human. Whether Sumerian, Egyptian, or ancient Hebrew, our ancestors all saw a bare law of survival. Human beings are born, eat grain that grows from the soil, and when the final breath passes away, this body decomposes and becomes one with the earth again. Mud, in the unconscious memory of all humanity, is a symbol of finitude. It represents fragility, death, and the weakness of the physical form. But a lifeless handful of earth cannot weep, laugh, or build ziggurat temple towers by itself. For clay to walk upon the ground, it needs something more sacred. It needs the breath of God, as in the Bible, or the blood of the gods, as in the Mesopotamian epic. The overlap among civilizations is not the ruin of a science fiction experiment. It is the shared sigh of all humanity. All ancient religions are telling us the same core tragedy. We are beings bound to the earth, yet we carry within us a soul that always looks toward the stars. Our ancestors did not wait for some alien force to teach them how to survive. Instead of surrendering before the destructive power of nature or the fragility of human life, they carved out a great system of belief for themselves, so they could stand firm. They created the Anunnaki from their own pain, fear, and fierce desire to live. In the end, the real battle does not take place in outer space or on some distant planet. The greatest battle from ancient Mesopotamia all the way to tonight has always been taking place quietly inside the mind of each one of us. We have traveled a very long road together. From the cracked, muddy fields of Mesopotamia, across the sun-dried brick walls of the ziggurat temple towers, and into the very center of the Anunnaki Council. The forbidden tablets of the Sumerians do not simply record a story about origins. They leave us with a great legacy about survival. No matter who you are, no matter what age you live in, the core truth remains unchanged. Human beings are very small. We carry within us the dust of finitude, yet we possess a soul that always longs to reach for the stars. And this is where we speak about faith. We modern people often take pride in science and technology, and sometimes we easily laugh at the faith our ancestors placed in the gods. We call it the superstition of an ignorant age. But think about it for a moment. In a modern world filled with unpredictable upheavals, an economic storm that sweeps away everything we have built, a disease that suddenly arrives, or emotional wounds that strike without warning, are we really so different from the Sumerian farmers standing helpless before the Great Flood? Faith in the gods is not weakness. It is an emergency shelter for the soul. It is the way humanity refuses the chaos and meaninglessness of the universe. To believe in the Anunnaki Council, to believe in God, or to believe in some sacred order, is to believe this: our tears, our daily efforts under crushing burdens, all carry a greater meaning. It means this world has someone at the helm, and your existence is not a useless accident. Faith keeps us from falling apart. It gives human beings the strength to keep sowing seeds, even after a flood has just swept through. But the mystery of history has always been a world with a deadly pull, and the dossier of the Mesopotamian tablets still remains open in countless perspectives that keep us awake in thought. After this journey, after the archaeological evidence and the hidden corners of the human mind have been laid bare, what would you choose to believe? Were they great gods representing the order of nature? Or were they truly biological architects from outer space? And is this Earth only a gigantic laboratory? I truly want to know what you are thinking. Leave your answer in the comments below. I will read it, and we will continue to dissect it together in the world of Kairos Codex. It is time to close the forbidden tablets of today. Whether you believe you are the product of a genetic intervention 400,000 years ago, or a sacred creation bearing the image of God tomorrow, when the sun rises, you will still carry within you the blood of an incredibly resilient life. Set down the burdens of today, breathe deeply, relax your mind, and drift into a truly peaceful sleep. I will see you again in the next